Adrian Carton de Wiart entered the world in Brussels, Belgium, on May 5, 1880. His family held ties to both Belgian and Irish aristocracy, placing him within a privileged social sphere. While his paternal lineage was well documented, his maternal origins are less clear. It's strongly suspected that King Leopold II of Belgium was his biological father, a connection that likely influenced his social standing, but might have also held a degree of personal stigma. His early life provided a combination of elite education and potential restlessness. He attended England's prestigious Balliol College at Oxford University. However, his formal studies were interrupted by a powerful draw to the battlefield. Abandoning his law degree, he enlisted to fight in the Boer War in South Africa. This decision was his first major deviation from a predictable aristocratic path. The human body has its limits, thresholds of pain, of injury, beyond which it is meant to cease functioning. But for Adrian Carton de Wiart, those limits were mere suggestions. Lines on a map he was determined to redraw. His story begins on the battlefields of the Boer War in South Africa around 1899. As a young, eager soldier, he found the action he craved and paid a brutal price. A bullet ripped through his stomach, followed quickly by another to the groin. Injuries like these would have ended the war for most men, might have ended their lives. But de Wiart wasn't about to be sidelined. Though his body screamed in protest, he endured a grueling recovery. He clawed his way back to the front lines. Sadly, this was merely his introduction to a career defined by relentless bloodshed. His wounds in South Africa were not the climax of his tale, but the opening chapter in a life that would redefine the meaning of Unbreakable. A few years later, de Wiart found himself with the Somaliland Camel Corps, facing a fierce uprising led by the charismatic Mohammed Abdullah Hassan, nicknamed the Mad Mullah. In the brutal fight at Chimberberis, the battle took a devastating turn for de Wiart. A bullet tore through his face, obliterating his left eye and leaving his ear a mangled ruin. The pain must have been unimaginable, the disfigurement horrifying. Surely this was the end of his fighting days. Most men would have sought an honorable discharge and the quiet of home. Not Carton de Wiart. The loss of an eye and the grotesque damage to his face seemed to him mere inconveniences. Doctors patched him up as best they could, and in a display of incredible determination, he was back on the front lines as soon as was medically feasible. For his courage in the face of such a wound, he was awarded the Distinguished Service Order. De Wiart jumped into the fray as soon as World War I broke out. This World War redefined the idea of industrialized combat, acting as an extraordinary abattoir. He was thrust into some of its most notorious battlegrounds, whose names ring ominously even now. At the Somme, where men died in droves for mere yards of ground, shrapnel tore into his skull, leaving him with yet another gruesome scar. Passchendaele, a battle synonymous with mud and misery, saw a bullet shatter his hip, an injury that would have left most men crippled. Yet he recovered, only to have a machine gun blast fragments into his leg at Cambrai. Even his already wounded ear became a target again at Arras. His body was quickly taking on the form of a war memorial, with every skirmish adding a fresh mark to the graphic mural. And those are merely the major wounds. In battles large and small, a jammed machine gun cost him several fingers. Shrapnel ripped his ankle apart. Yet through sheer force of will, he survived it all. Most soldiers would have crumbled under the mental and physical strain of constant warfare. For Carton de Wiart, it was seemingly fuel, pushing him to be more audacious, a defiant figure amidst the carnage. Medically speaking, it's astonishing that Adrian Carton de Wiart not only survived his injuries, but continued to function with a degree of normalcy. The loss of his eye and severe damage to his ear would have significantly impacted both his vision and his hearing. His depth perception would have been compromised, and damage to the inner ear could have caused issues with balance and coordination. The shrapnel wound to his skull likely caused some degree of traumatic brain injury, TBI, potentially leading to problems with memory, attention, emotional control, and persistent headaches. Carton de Wiart's missing fingers would have greatly reduced his dexterity and grip strength, making everyday tasks like dressing, eating, and handling objects a constant challenge. His hip wound, gunshot damage to his leg, and ankle injuries almost certainly caused long-term pain, reduced mobility, and potentially a permanent limp. In an era before antibiotics, even minor wounds carried immense risks. His constant re-injury and exposure to harsh battlefield conditions repeatedly exposed him to severe infections that could have been fatal without prompt medical attention. Adrian Carton de Wiart encountered a crucial situation that pushed the frontier of human endurance during World War I, particularly in the harsh surroundings of the Western Front. His hand severely injured in the Battle of the Somme in 1916. The injuries were not merely superficial. Bones were shattered and flesh was mangled beyond recognition. The medical facilities, overwhelmed by the scale of the conflict, often had to make quick decisions about the care of soldiers. In de Wiart's case, the doctors hesitated, aware of the potential consequences of further surgery on a body that had already endured so much. Yet for de Wiart, such hesitation was untenable. His experiences on the battlefield, coupled with a personal ethos that seemed to defy the very concept of surrender, propelled him to take a harrowing decision. But he chose to address the damage to his hand himself. With what could only be described as a devastating resolve, he removed his own fingers. After taking such drastic action, de Wiart persuaded the medical staff to complete the amputation. This persuasion, born from a mix of desperation and determination, led to the formal medical removal of what remained of his fingers. In 1915, de Wiart was captured by German forces during World War I. This occurred near the Somme River, a significant and highly contested location on the Western Front. Following his capture, he was detained at Holzminden officer-prisoner of war camp in Germany, a facility noted for its strict security and the rigorous conditions imposed on detainees. While at Holzminden, de Wiart participated in an escape attempt. He, along with other prisoners, undertook the task of digging a tunnel from within the camp. This effort was characterized by careful planning and coordination among the prisoners, with de Wiart contributing despite having only one functional hand. The work on the tunnel was carried out covertly to avoid detection by the camp guards. However, the escape attempt through the tunnel, which demanded months of secretive labor by the prisoners, was ultimately not successful. His greatest act of daring appeared when he grew older. He was a living example of decades of horrific combat, scarred and worn from battle, and wearing his recognizable eye patch. Most commanders would have considered him a relic, a figurehead to be given a comfortable desk job far behind the lines. But when World War II erupted, de Wiart refused to be sidelined. With boldness, he found ways to parachute behind enemy lines, a veteran well into his 60s leading daring missions. Was this stubborn defiance a form of madness? A touch of the heroic? Perhaps it was a potent, unsettling mix of both, a defiant roar against the inevitable limitations of mortality. If you like what we are doing here, subscribe to stay updated on our upcoming videos and tell us what you think in the comments.